Welcome to Storytime with Stephanie, a platform for independent authors to share their stories of transformation, self-help, education, and sometimes pure entertainment. Want to grow with us on this journey and support these up and coming authors? Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss an episode. I'm your host, Stephanie Outen, the literary doula. Are you ready for the show? Let's do this. Hello. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Storytime with Stephanie. I am your host, Stephanie Outen, and I'm so glad for you all to be back with us for season 8. And as you all know, this is a platform where we have amazing authors to be able to share their stories of transformation, of healing, of inspiration. And today's guest is no different. Having traveled to over 40 countries and lived and worked for most of her 20s in Europe and Asia, Kristen Van Nest found herself through travel. A comedian and business owner based in Los Angeles, California, she now spends her time writing, including her debut memoir, Where to Nest, and funny tweets featured on Millennial meme accounts. Running her successful marketing business and coaching others through humorous educational content on YouTube, Instagram, and more. In her debut travel memoir, Where to Nest, which came out in 2024, Kristen weaves an entertaining story for anyone who needs a good laugh, travel ideas, and inspiration for ways to add more joy into their lives. After college, getting her dream job in New York City, Kristen thought she had everything a modern millennial was supposed to want: a sexy zip code, a boyfriend, and a corporate job. But instead of feeling content, she soon realized she had no idea who she was and what made her happy. Naturally, she did what any sane person would do. She hopped on a plane and spent the rest of her 20s living abroad and traveling the world in search of love, adventure, and new and exciting places to eat bread. By stripping away the cultural norms and expectations she grew up with in the US, she rebuilt from scratch a new identity, sense of self, and life purpose that ultimately led her to move to Los Angeles to pursue comedy. Through living in Luxembourg on a Fulbright Scholarship, and then in China for 3 years working for a wine importer, Where to Nest takes us across the globe, including nearly being murdered by a lover while skiing in Switzerland, navigating Greece during a banking crisis, and visiting Thailand during a governmental coup as a woman struggles to find belonging. Everyone, please help me welcome Kristen Van Nest. Kristen, are you here with us?
Hi.
How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being a part of Storytime with Stephanie. We are so glad to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so honored.
So, Kristen, you are humorous, you're inspirational. I've had a chance to watch your Instagram videos, and I want to know just a little bit about kind of where did this comedian in you come from? How was this birthed?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I was living in Shanghai and where I worked for the largest wine importer, and I was kind of trying to figure out like what is my purpose? And I had a life coach at the time, and she was like, "You connect with people through humor." I was like, "I do," and she was like, "Yes." And so that kind of, I never really thought about it that way, but then I kind of was like, oh, she's right. And this is something I love doing. So I started doing stand up and improv. And I really, for me, a lot of my life purpose is kind of storytelling that brings people together. And I really see how humor plays into that. I always think of in Mary Poppins when they're like, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Like,
Yeah.
when the world's rough or when people are going through tough times, it's really hard to discuss kind of more serious topics. But I feel
Mhm.
like humor is something that kind of makes a safe space where we can talk about those more intimate things, and kind of take the edge off whenever things get stressful. So that's kind of how I realized that that was part of what was important to me and part of my storytelling message.
Okay. So, as it relates to your storytelling, your debut memoir, Where to Nest, you have definitely been someone that has taken a lot of adventures, right? And here's the book cover. I love this cover because it's just so vibrant, right? And your yellow
Oh, thank
suitcase,
you.
the orange background. But you don't just have this book, you also have your second book that's coming out as well. And that one is The Perfect Modern Wife, a psychological thriller. So, we're going to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about both of those stories today. So, tell us a little bit about Where to Nest and how that came about. You share about just hopping on a plane and starting your journey, and almost like an eat, pray, love adventure.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say I was living in New York City, and I had, kind of like you read in my bio, like a dream job. I had a boyfriend. I lived in New York. Like I was like living that Sex in the City lifestyle.
Yes.
But I was like not very happy. Like I just didn't really understand what my purpose was. So luckily I had applied for the Fulbright Scholarship, which is
Mhm.
a grant through the State Department, a year earlier, just kind of like, we'll see what happens. And then they were like, you got it. I was like, oh,
Wow.
yeah. So I was like, all right, on paper I should be very happy where I am, but you know, I'm not. And my roommate at the time was like, I was like, should I go? And she's like, you literally have like a free excuse with a visa to live in Europe for a year. Why would you not leave? And I was like,
Yes.
okay, you're 100% correct. Um, so that's kind of where my book starts and kind of I had been with a high school boyfriend for like 5 years and we broke up.
Mm,
And so I realized that a lot of my identity was tied into him, like
mm,
he drank dark beer. So I drank dark beer, but do
mm,
I like dark beer? I hadn't really like thought through the basics of who I was as a person.
mm.
So I kind of started that journey on the Fulbright, traveling all over Europe and meeting people who lived all different sorts of ways.
Right.
And so I feel like through that, I was like, oh, everyone can live these bizarre little ways that they want to. Like, how do I want to live?
Mhm.
And so that's kind of how my book starts. And then over the decade of my 20s, ending with me living in Shanghai, and then the book ends with me moving to LA to pursue comedy. I kind of like discovered and filled in all those gaps of who I really was as a person.
I love that. And, especially as women, we sometimes will allow our identity to be tied into someone else's, right? And you
Yeah.
experience that with your high school boyfriend, high school leading into your, adulthood. And we will allow ourselves to be trapped in that identity and live this life that really was not purposed for us. And I love that you decided to kind of step out of that box and say, it's time for me to figure out who I truly am. And you did that through travel to going, by going abroad. So tell us a little bit about some of your first experiences, because you share some hilarious stories, some crazy stories. And I want people to know
Yeah.
everyone's journey may not be like Kristen's, but this was her journey and she was able to document it through this awesome book, Where to Nest. But just tell us a little bit about kind of when you landed, what were some of the experiences that you had?
Yeah, so I'll go into the one where I was like almost killed by a lover.
Yes.
I was visiting a friend. I met this guy who was like really cute in Luxembourg, and it was a friend's brother. And so he invited me to go skiing in Switzerland, and I'm like, yeah, I'm in my early 20s now, older. I'm like, how did I survive? Like,
Right.
no, like this was not safe for me to just be like, sure, I'll come to Zurich with
Right.
you. But I went skiing with him and he took me off piste, which means like off trail.
Mm.
And I get to the top of this hill and I ski down a little bit and then I look and it's a 45-degree angle. Like we're not talking like, oh, just meandering. It's like straight down. And if you ski too far to the side, you're going off a cliff. This is not
Oh
like
my
the
God.
official trail. Yeah. So he was like yelling up at me like, you don't learn if you don't fall. And I'm like, I'm gonna die though. This isn't like an
Wow.
oops, this is like so I ended just rolling down like a sack of potatoes. And I was like, I'm not even trying to impress this man anymore. I'm trying to survive. And even then, like, I'm in my early 20s, so I'm struggling in my head, like, oh, I really like him. Like, I'm trying to
Mhm.
impress him. And then I was like, no, he just tried to
Mhm.
murder me. Like, this is not a kind of relationship. Like, you're learning from falling. You're learning from like putting me in like a near death
Yes.
experience.
Yeah.
Um, so that was like one of the first examples. Or I went to also in Germany, I went to Oktoberfest,
Mhm.
the beer festival,
Yes.
and my friend's cousin owned a meat stand in the Oktoberfest festival. So she was like,
Wait.
"Oh, my cousin's there."
Wait 1 second, Kristen. Is this the same friend whose brother tried to
No, thank
oh,
goodness. Oh my
'cause
God,
I was like, "Girl,
no,
you need to change your friends."
yeah. No, 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 no. So I hung out with him all day
Mhm.
and just kind of like at the festival, but it was so fun because he barely spoke English. So we're trying to communicate. And basically what I got is that he's like a punk rock motorcyclist, like he's in a motorcycle gang,
Mhm.
but he also plays handball and like works in a meat stall. And I was like, I've never, in America, like those don't feel like being very athletic and in like a motorcycle gang. Like you don't usually see that like in the Venn diagram. That's not
Right.
like happening. So there are a lot of people I met through travel that are kind of in that category where I'm like, oh, I never even thought of this. Or another girl at Oktoberfest, I was doing couch surfing. Again, I don't know how I'm alive. But I was staying with this girl. I made sure I stayed with girls and like read
Right.
the reviews to be like, okay, this is a girl.
Good.
But she's like, oh, I'm a go-go dancer. And I was like, what's that? And she's like, oh, I dress in gold and like dance in a cage at a BMW party. And I'm like, what? Like, what? At a BMW, like a corporate event? Like it was so,
Wow.
and her mother was like a government official, and she was like, "Oh, my mom knows, but my friends don't know." And I was like,
Oh,
I went up to her room, and there were like all these like sparkly bras on her bathtub, but not ones that you could wear under a shirt, like like rhinestones and
yeah.
things. And that was my first like, what is going on?
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
yeah, but like, no judgment. It's like everyone chooses their own path, and
Yes.
it really made me realize like what I had grown up in. I grew up in like a very
Mhm.
conservative American town,
Mhm.
and that everyone has their own way of living,
Yeah.
and that's what brings people peace and brings people happiness. And
Mhm.
so it kind of like reminded me, oh, I don't have to think through the scope of like growing up how everyone in my hometown grew up. I
Mm.
can actually be whoever I want to be.
Yeah, I love that. So tell us a little bit about some of the times, during your travels that you felt the most joy and the most peace because you identified that you were coming into your true identity.
Yeah, trying to think of some. Uh, There was one where I was going through a breakup and I was traveling through Greece.
Mhm.
I really liked this guy, but he was an architect and I was a comedian. And so,
Mm,
architects get a specific license for their country,
okay.
which for him was the UK. And I was kind of figuring out that I would be moving. I wasn't yet knowing that I was moving to LA, but I
Mhm.
knew that I loved comedy and wanted to perform it. Um, so I was traveling around Greece and I was standing on the Acropolis, which is kind of like
Mm,
the main tourist attraction, and overlooking and could see the ocean.
mhm.
And was like, oh, I'm on my own adventure, like by myself. I'll go to the ocean. This was a 4 mile wide walk, blisters by the end. It's in the middle of Brexit, so none of the banks are open.
Oh my
Like, by
gosh.
the time I got to the water, I'm like, not a happy camper. I'm like this odyssey that I set up in my mind as like
Yeah.
some like, oh, I'm just walking and finding myself. But by the time I get to the water, there's like these elderly women and they've done their grocery shopping and they
Mhm.
have their bathing suits on and they're just sitting and swimming in the water and watching them and knowing that at the time it was Brexit, which means all the banks were shut down. Greece
Okay.
was going through a banking crisis. There were like protests, not where I was, but like in the streets at night.
Mhm.
Um, And so all of this is going on in the backdrop. Meanwhile, I'm like crying over a boy, which is not a big deal at all.
Right.
And then I see these women who their country's going through this turmoil, like they can't even take money out of an ATM, but they're just finding joy with each other and having this experience together. And it
Mhm.
reminded me like of the power of friendship and also
Yeah.
just how, all these things can be going on, but like big picture, there's important
Mhm.
values and community that can really um, make you happy. And that's kind of what the focus should be on. You can always be worried about men
Mm.
or whatever, but like in the end, like happiness comes from what you make of life.
I love that. I love that. So, how long after you had all your travel experiences did you decide, oh, I want to write a book about it?
Yeah, so I was basically at the beginning of COVID. Before COVID, I was directing a YouTube channel and an actor, and I was in a Women in Film mentorship program. And
Okay.
my mentor was Joanna Johnson. She created the show, The Fosters,
Mhm.
and the other one, oh my gosh, I'm blank. Good Trouble on
Okay.
Freeform.
Hmm.
Yeah, so she was like, you're writing, acting, directing, but if you're really good at one thing, they'll let you do the rest. So
Okay.
stop like trying to be good at everything, try and be good at one thing. And then COVID hit. And
Mhm.
so I couldn't go on stage. I couldn't meet up and direct shorts for
Mhm.
YouTube. I could
Mhm.
only write. And so it was kind of like the universe or God being like, she told you, you got to focus on the one thing and you only can focus on it right now.
Mhm.
So I couldn't travel again, the thing that
Yeah.
I love doing. So I took a mentor writing class through UCB with Margot Lightman, who's an amazing author and memoirist, and started there. And then it was a 4-year period in between like writing the nonfiction sells on proposal. So you write a
Mhm.
proposal and my agent, finding an agent, her pitching it out,
Mhm.
finding a publisher, and then having it,
Mhm.
writing it, and then having it go live. So that was a 4-year period.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, that piece I love because I know, working predominantly with independent authors, always, wanting to go beyond and, find that literary agent that's going to help them get out there and get with a traditional publisher. What were some of the things that you had to do? Now, you were kind of in the space, right? But for people who may not be in that space and have access to literary agents, what would be some of your guidance that you would give
Mm.
for how they can actually make their book attractive to a literary
Mhm.
agent and like how to find one?
Yeah. So there's a website called Manuscript Wishlist where agents will post what they're looking for.
Okay.
And I actually applied to over 100 agents. And uh, as they say, only one needs to say yes. And
Yes.
so luckily one said yes. And same with a publisher, only one needs to say yes. And luckily the publisher said yes. So that's kind of, I would think about like what is the agent looking for and
Mhm.
how would you market your book to that.
Mhm.
For my book that's coming out, Perfect Modern Wife, that's coming
Mhm.
out in August, I'm actually self-publishing that one.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I'm choosing that path is because I want it to be on, when you work with a traditional publisher, right? It can only come out on paperback, ebook, audiobook.
Right.
But if we think about how the world works now, post
Mhm.
COVID,
Yeah.
a lot of people listen to podcasts like right
Yes.
now. So you could put your book on a podcast and they might like in the background watch YouTube videos or listen to YouTube videos while they're, doing laundry.
Mhm.
So for my next book, I want to put it on all channels, which means kind of
Oh.
publishing it myself. So
Mhm.
that's a little bit of a different approach that I'm
Mhm.
taking this time and kind of seeing how that works.
Mhm.
That's really focused on channel distribution.
Mhm.
Um, so I think if someone's thinking about going the traditional route or self-publishing, I think they're both valid ways
Right.
of working as an author, and it's really kind of figuring out what works best for you. I think a lot of the marketing, if you're doing well, in both cases, you're really doing most of the marketing.
Yes.
Um, but
Mm.
if you're self-publishing, it's all on you. So it's like a little bit of a different circumstance.
I love that. I appreciate that. And I wrote it down because we'll make sure that we share it in the comments, but manuscriptwishlist.com, because we have a lot of
Yeah.
authors that do watch the show, that do listen to the audio version as well. And we want to be able to support them in their journey of, whether they want to get with a traditional publisher or not, but just knowing how to really access literary agents and how to pitch them is going to be helpful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And nonfiction sells on proposal. So you don't write the whole book. You only write like two or three chapters and then you
Uh-huh.
talk about marketing. It's slightly different. And then with fiction, you have to have the full
Yes.
manuscript available. Yeah.
Okay. Now, so you did kind of take a switch. You went from nonfiction, which was to share your memoir in Where to Nest, and then you took a different leap with your next book, which is coming out in August, as you said, and that's Perfect Modern Wife, a thriller.
Yeah. Yes.
So I love fiction. Okay. The fiction is my jam. And so I love the creativity. Now, don't get me wrong, because there's creativity in nonfiction as well, right? But there's such a level of creative license that you have when you write fiction. And so I want to hear kind of what made you take that turn and write this fiction book. And we want to hear about it because it sounds so interesting
Yeah.
based on the title.
Yeah. So I would say when a new author's like thinking about what they might want to write,
Mhm.
it's a lot easier to sell thriller than memoir because thriller is like has a very devoted, committed
Right.
audience where they just like rip through thrillers. While
Yeah.
like memoir, it's a little bit harder for people to know what they're gonna get, and
Mhm.
so it's a more difficult category to sell.
Yeah.
And for me, with my thrill, with also, I would say, with nonfiction, you're talking about real people. And
Yes.
so you need to, I had to talk to my family about what I was writing. My book's hardly about my family, but,
Right.
you know, you never know. Like, um, I described someone in my first draft as being like very Marilyn
Mhm.
Monroe-esque, and they were like, "Why did you describe me as looking like a slut?" And I was like, "What? She's like a classic,
Right.
beautiful woman."
Wow.
But everyone has like a different way that they picture things, and so when you're writing nonfiction, you are writing real stories, and you need to be delicate about how that impacts people. When
Yes.
you're writing fiction, you can write whatever you want.
Right.
So I also think like emotionally it's easier to write fiction because
Mhm.
it doesn't impact your real life. And I loved what you were describing earlier about how like we can make our lives very focused around other people and
Mhm.
how really it's about finding your own life. And I would
Yes.
say that's a theme in Perfect Modern Wife as well,
Okay.
my thriller. Where it's about like trad wives, the movement online. I don't know if you've ever seen Secret Wives of Mormon Lives, that would
Okay.
Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Yeah.
That would be like another show where they're very like in that trad wife movement
Mhm.
of like what does it mean to be a woman and what's your role. So with my thriller, I'm kind of looking into that same concept of like should women be in the house? Should women be working? In my view, women should be doing whatever they want.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and what I find interesting about the trad wife movement of this movement of pushing traditional female roles is the women who are pushing these roles are actually the breadwinners in their homes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So if you think about it, they're making all of this money off of social media where
Mhm.
they act and dress like, they're the mother and they take care of the home and that's their role. But not only is that their role is also as the breadwinner who is bringing money into the home, who is paying for everything in the
Mhm.
home. So I think it's a very interesting concept in like modern feminism of
Yes.
like, instead, it used to be you were pressured into being in the home, then you were pressured being successful at work, and then like Lean In was like, you can have it all, you should be
Mhm.
successful in everything. And then these trad wife women are doing everything, and there's been a lot of articles about how exhausted they are. And
Sure.
so I wanted to focus on that, and it's the same concept of finding the what's right for you as a person. But this time it's in fiction versus not fiction.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what makes it a thriller.
Yeah, so basically, there's four friends in the beginning, and a decade later, one of them is this famous trad wife influencer. She has six kids, she lives on a farm, and she runs wellness retreats, where women can come, and if they've had trouble finding a husband, they go and, take courses on like how to be the perfect modern wife and,
Mhm.
attract the man of your dreams, and how do you have to behave to get a man to want you. And so the one of their friends goes on this retreat and then goes MIA and disappears. So the
Mm.
book is the third
Ooh,
friend coming, and it's a novella, so it's
okay.
designed to be read in like 2 hours. Like, yeah. So the third friend comes and is like, "Where is my other?" She first meets the tradwife friend, and she's so different, and then she's also searching for what's happened to her other friend.
Mm.
So I won't say more than that,
Yeah.
but that's kind of the theme of the book.
Yeah.
And all the women are kind of thinking through like what they want in their life. The one visiting the farm, she's a very successful executive, and her boyfriend is kind of like a stay-at-home boyfriend. He's a painter, but doesn't really make
Interesting.
any money. Yeah, so she's like, is she happy with this person? And then
Mm.
she sees her friend who has six kids and a husband and is doing all these things. And is that friend happier than her? Kind of like thinking through what their life choices have led to.
And that just, it's so much based on even reality, right? Where the comparison game, is this
Yes.
person, is their life better than mine? And what am I doing with my life? And especially if there's that social media, perspective that you share as far as them being influencers. It's like, I see this on social media. I don't even know if it's really real, but I want this. And how can I get it? And we live in this world, unfortunately, that's spent so much time in comparison, right? And
Yeah.
so, what were some of the things that you had to do in order to let's see, like kind of research this? I know you said you've seen it online, you've seen these trends, but what were some of the things that you did? Because what people don't realize, especially when writing fiction, there is a lot of creative license. Yes, you can make things up, but there's a lot of research that goes into it as well, because you want to make things appear as realistic as possible, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
what were some of the things that you had to do to
Yeah. So,
create this book?
yeah. So my hometown is very traditional value conservative, where, a, the majority of mothers growing up are stay-at-home moms, and the majority of fathers work and
Work.
commute into New York.
Okay.
So that's kind of the environment I grew up in. And then my high school homecoming king is actually the husband of one of the most famous trad wife influencers.
Okay. Okay.
So a hit piece came out on him, which was really interesting. Uh, and so I was like, wow, this hits really close to home because I grew up with him and now
Mm,
he's kind of this famous figure.
mhm.
And at the same time, I was finding a lot of my friends, there was a common theme of they were now making more than their boyfriends or husbands, but they were still doing all the domestic labor, cleaning the house, taking care
Okay.
of the kids. Like, so I realized that this was a thing that was happening across like friends across the world. Like
Right.
when this idea came to me, I was in the UK actually in Hampstead Heath where they have these baths that you can swim in, and there's an all women's bath. So it's basically a huge pond, and you just have a little slot, and only women could be in this pond.
Okay.
So I'm standing on the platform and I'm looking out, and it's mothers and daughters. It's like women in their 60s who are just coming to bathe during lunch.
Mhm,
It's everyone just kind of like swimming, and it's all women. And speaking of divine intervention,
mhm.
I was standing there looking out, and the idea for the book just came to me, and I wrote it in 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a novella, so it's easier than writing a 50,000 word. It's like
But
13,000.
still, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously there was a lot of editing after that, but
Mhm.
it kind of was like all of these little pieces coming together where I realized that this was something that I knew a lot about. And I also had a very clear message of what I kind of wanted to focus on and what the idea was that was driving the fiction.
Okay. So when you think about this story, what is the what's the key takeaway that you want your readers to be able to experience from this particular story, The Perfect Modern Wife?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's written to be very kind of like fun and unput downable. Like going
Mhm.
back to the idea of Mary Poppins and a spoonful of sugar, like it's not supposed to be academic or like about these theoretical, very serious feminist topics. It's supposed to be fun to read, and there's
Right.
jokes in it because I'm a comedian.
Right.
But I think the end thing is kind of thinking about, well, how do you see your role as a woman? And like you were saying, not comparing yourself to other women. You need
Right.
to choose what's right for you and not be like, oh, I should be living this way because other
Mhm.
women are living this way. It's about
Right.
picking, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, then being happy being a stay-at-home mom. If you want to commit to work and not have kids, that's fine too. It's really whatever is right for you.
Yeah.
And you're never going to be happy if you're trying to um, do something,
Yeah.
fill someone else's life.
That's right. And I find it so interesting going from Where to Nest to The Perfect Modern Wife. You have the same theme, the same
Yeah,
message, right?
you just made me realize that. I didn't even realize it until you were describing it, and I was like, wait, Stephanie has figured out that I've written the same thing in both books. But yeah, clearly it's something that's kind of touching home. I don't know. As a woman in my mid 30s, I kind of am like thinking about these things.
Yeah, it's absolutely something because I think, so many of us, especially as women, like I said, we get stuck in trying to figure out who we are. And you had this amazing opportunity. And look, anybody who knows me knows I love Eat, Pray, Love, Eat, Pray, Love. I watched that movie so many times, right? And you get to see this transformation, right? Similar to what you experienced in your travels of being able to go from, gosh, I'm like stuck in this life that I don't really know is the life I want. But it's kind of like what I've created for myself, but now I'm given this opportunity to go and explore. And in this exploration, I get to see me, the real Kristen, and who I was created to be. And I believe every woman needs to have that kind of experience. Now, you may not go and travel the world to get it, right? But it's being able to sit still and ask yourself some questions about what have I allowed myself to sit in that was really not my space to sit in.
I
And
love that. Yeah.
yeah, and where do I want to go next? Like, who do I want to be? And I love that you took this opportunity. And your friend encouraged you, right? Your roommate was like, "Girl, go."
Yeah. She's like, what are you being crazy? You get to go and live in Europe. Like, go.
Yeah, for a whole year, like explore and discover. And everybody needs a friend like that. Everybody needs a roommate, a friend, a sister, a cousin that says, just go and figure it out. Because in figuring it out, you have discovered your voice, right?
Yeah.
And so, what are some of the things that outside of writing, what are some of the other ways in which you're using your voice to impact others, to impact, people's lives?
I feel like through my social media, my comedy videos, I feel like I'm doing a lot of that. The world's kind of dark right now, and
It
so
is.
I feel like for me, the comedy is, for me personally, the gift is it's a release, but it's also a way that I can bring people happiness and
Mhm.
kind of take them out of whatever they're dealing with, and also empathize. I think
Mhm.
that's the beauty about being an author, being a writer, or in this, any form of storytelling. It's really about creating empathy, and they show that people who read more books are more empathetic.
Yes.
So I've been lucky to have this experience of seeing how all these different people live, and I want to kind of share that with others where they can empathize and relate.
Yeah.
So that's definitely kind of my other way that I release and kind of hopefully bring positivity into the world.
Okay. I would say yes through your comedy. Definitely, you bring that positivity. You take what's dark and turn it into light, which I love.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
do you see yourself writing more books? Is that something in your future?
Yeah, so my plan right now is to write novellas, so kind of like shorter books that you can finish in 2 hours, and put them out, like I was saying before, on all channels. So on YouTube, on podcasts, on audiobook. I'm an actor and voice actor, so I did
Okay.
in a studio, I recorded the audiobook for my memoir, Where to Nest, and then I have like an at-home professional studio that I've
Oh,
used
I love
for
it.
these. Yeah. So the plan is to just keep writing books and kind of like spreading that love. And yeah,
I love that. So I've never written a novella. I know I've read a lot of novellas. Tell the authors who kind of feel stuck, and they're in this place of, oh my gosh, I don't know how I can write this whole book. For the author who says, I'm having a hard time writing this book. It's like, it's going to be too lengthy. Maybe they could consider doing a novella. So what's the structure that you use
yeah.
to be able to write these books pretty quickly?
Yeah, so one of my reasonings for doing novellas comes down to one of my goals, which is to sell IP for TV and film. I
Okay.
live in Los Angeles. I'm
Mhm.
surrounded by screenwriters.
Yes.
One of the best parts of being an author versus a screenwriter is when a screenwriter sells their story, they sell the story to the studio. They no longer own the IP.
Right.
They have no rights. As an author, you own the IP. So if you don't like how they're telling your story, you have a little bit more say.
Mhm.
Monetarily, you also have way more revenue stream than
Okay.
if you're a screenwriter. So that's why I like being an author. And
Mhm.
when I went through the traditional publishing route, as I told you, it took 4 years from writing
Mhm.
the proposal to having the book published.
Mhm.
I wrote the book in 6 months. Of course, that doesn't include editing.
Right.
But when I think about that, I'm like, one intellectual property, one IP in 4 years
Mhm.
is not really a lot.
Right.
And I'm sure as as you get more experience. So when I think from a business perspective,
Mhm.
writing short stories creates your IP, which if you're like a business, you're the
Yeah.
brand as the author, and then
Mhm.
the IP is each of your products.
Mhm.
So if you can launch more products, you have more chances for success.
Yeah.
Or if, let's say, one of them is terrible,
Mhm.
it's okay. You didn't spend 4 years on it. You spent like a couple months or however long it took on it.
Yes.
So from a business perspective, I think that I want to focus on writing these shorter stories because
Okay.
then I'm creating the world and the IP, the intellectual
Mhm.
property that actually I can create more versus if I'm writing full books.
Okay.
For structure, I looked at a short story. I don't know the name of it, but I got a copy because I live in LA and I can get
Mhm.
these things. Of
Yes.
this short story, it was sold to the producers of Barbarian, and it sold for $600,000.
Wow.
Yeah, granted, it sold because of. I mean, I love the story. I'm not
Mhm.
knocking the story, but there was a very famous. I don't forget his name, but a very famous producer attached.
Okay.
So it's not just the story; it's
Right.
who's
It's the
coming with
name
the
attached to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I looked at that, and that was about 10,000 words.
Mm.
And it is like a full story. So it
Okay.
has like a beginning, middle, and end.
Right.
Um, and it's told in the third person, which apparently Gen Z only reads first person.
Okay.
So that's a bummer on my end because I'm writing things in third person. But on screen, if you can't see on screen what people are thinking in their head, so you kind of
Exactly.
have it in that format. And so it's really about like showing like a lot of short horror is only the premise. It's like, here's the scary thing and
Mhm.
here's the scary idea, but it doesn't show how the characters get out and grow from the
Mhm.
scary thing.
Right.
So the novella is cool because you're doing a full, like, you're doing a maybe truncated novel
Mhm.
versus when you read like short stories in a book or online, like people read short stories, those are usually just the idea that you would have at
Right.
the beginning, not like the full. So that's kind of why I'm focused on that element. And for me, it's more fun for me to create the characters in the world.
Mhm.
I'm not as excited about like all the dialogue in the longer
Okay.
parts of it.
Mhm.
So I can kind of focus on the parts I like, and business wise, I
Okay.
think having more IP is kind of like a advantage, let's say.
That makes sense. I love that. So for all of you out there who might be struggling with writing a longer, the 25,000 word book, consider a novella, 10,000 words, right? And really still being able to bring the whole story together, but in a shorter way and creating more IP, right? From a
Yeah,
business perspective. So I love that advice. Thank you.
yeah.
Um, okay, so let's see. I think I have a couple final questions for you. What advice what advice would you give? And this is one of the questions I love to ask all of my authors. What advice would you give to that woman or even that man who says, I want to be able to tell my story, right? My truth, what I experienced, but I just feel doubtful because who would want to hear my story? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I'd say as someone who's written memoir and fiction,
Mhm.
I would actually say try and turn it into fiction as your first book. Because memoir is hard to sell, and
Mhm.
I think it'll be easier to sell a memoir when you're more established as an author.
Yes.
So I would elect like it's also I think easier sometimes to write thriller or something that's like happening over a short period of time
Yes.
than it is to be like I want to figure out what has happened through my entire life
Hmm.
and truncate that into a book.
Yes.
That is a huge project.
Hmm.
And also, you know, what might be very sentimental. It's so emotional what happens in your life that it can be really hard to write about. You need distance from it.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
I've
That's
read,
what I did.
oh yeah, okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing I did. I was, I walked through a very heavy period in my life and I decided that I wanted to write this book and I wrote it as fiction because at that point I didn't really want people to know what I was walking through. And so I created characters to tell certain parts of my story and it's fiction. So some things are made up but the majority is true. And so it allowed me the space to breathe, right? To be able to
Yeah.
share these painful points in my life, the fun parts in my life. But then later on, I was able to share, the true parts of my story in an anthology, right? And so
Yeah.
that was a great way for me to be able to get it out and release like the pressure that was on me at the time was to share it through fiction and then later on share through nonfiction. So I value that advice, you being able to share that with someone because yes, life is heavy. We've experienced some things that sometimes we just don't know how to talk about, but you can have this opportunity to still share it through fiction and be able to get it off your chest. And then later on, if you decide, tell the true story, right? Because the
Yeah.
true story actually helps to set people free. So that's my whole, desire is to make sure people get free from those things that are holding them back and holding them in bondage. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
Yeah, and like talking about that, like the emotional rawness of if you put out a memoir, you're getting feedback on it. Like people will be
Hmm.
like, I don't like her character or blah blah blah. And like you have to because I'm a comedian, I have dealt with that, so I'm very thick-skinned and it doesn't bother me. But if you're really still emotionally close to something and you're getting people's feedback on your life, that's
Yes.
very difficult. And that's why with fiction, you have at least another buffer between you and the story that I think makes it easier for you and also makes it easier to sell because fiction
Mhm.
is easier to sell.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, last question. This one's going to make you think a little bit. If your book were a soundtrack, what would be the title of the theme song and why?
Ooh, um, I mean, I think my memoir would probably be Sea of Wine by Telemann, which is a British band. But I worked in the wine industry in China, and so
Mhm.
it's very much like something that's, you know, like wine is part of my life.
Yes.
And I feel like it kind of like is the journey of like processing
Mm.
emotions, maybe
Ah.
while drinking wine, which
Mm.
I would encourage people to drink wine while they read my book. And then for my second book, um, it's called Ricky Rigamortis is the name of the song. I'm just gonna find yes, I'm gonna find it really quick because
Okay.
I want to say the right name. And I have been listening to it on repeat because it's a pretty
Okay.
new song.
And while you're
Um,
doing that, I'm just going to read that your books can be purchased on your website at dot.card/Kristen Van Nest, correct? All
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
So that's where you can purchase Kristen's books, both of them, Where to Nest, as well as her new book that's going to be coming out in August, right? Perfect Modern Wife. So the word DOT, and then dot cards, CARDS /Kristen Van Nest. And we'll have this running across the screen. Those will be able to see it visually. And in the audio version, we'll have it in the comments. So you'll be able to just go right to that link to be able to purchase Kristen's books.
Okay, I found the song.
All
It's
right.
called Ronnie Rigor Mortis by Ricky Chilton.
Okay.
All of his songs are funny, so
Mhm.
that's why I kind of like it as Ronnie Rigor Mortis. So
Yes.
that song is about this guy who is like, the guy you hire to knock people off. And but the song is like he works at Waffle House and his like side gig is like a hitman. So
Okay.
I like that song because it's kind of like Southern, and the book takes place on a farm, but it also
Mhm.
has these funny elements, which is my background as well. So
That
that would be my song for Perfect Modern Wife.
I love that. That's hilarious. Well, I am so grateful to have had you here. You all can connect with Kristen on her social media, and that's at Kristen Van Nest. Kristen Van Nest. You'll be able to contact her, connect with her, just hear more about what she has upcoming, the things that she's done. It's super phenomenal to have had you here. I value and appreciate just the content that you share. I value and appreciate you being able to share your memoir because it is not easy. It's not easy. It's not easy to write about yourself, and your experiences, but you did that in such a crafty way, using your humor, using your experiences, and the hard parts, the good parts, and the fun parts. And I appreciate you being able to do that so eloquently. And then in this upcoming book, Perfect Modern Wife, being able to take your creativity and turning it into this fiction novella that I'm sure people will love. I can't wait for it to come out so I can listen or read, probably listen because I'm spending more time with audiobooks now. But it's just been so great to have you, Kristen. And I thank you. We were supposed to do this last year, but things end up happening. And I'm just glad that you came back and that we were able to do this with you today. So thank you so much for being here. Any parting words that you want to share before we close out?
Oh gosh, no, just thank you for having me. I'm so glad we can make it happen, and I
Yes.
love your show, so appreciate it.
Thank you. And I wish you well in everything that you're doing. All of your outside of just the literary space. You do marketing, you have your YouTube show, all these different things that you're doing. I wish you many blessings in that and that you continue to, walk in spaces, in places where you have influence and people with influence want to, speak with you and work with you. And I just pray that you'll be able to receive every great, rich blessing that you so richly deserve.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's so sweet.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. It was great having you.
Bye.
All right, we'll see you soon. All right. So, everyone, thank you so much for being a part of this show. We are so appreciative of having Kristen with us today. And she said something that I felt was really important to share as my closing note. And that is that happiness is what you make out of life. Happiness is what you make out of life. So, I want you to resonate on that. Think about what are the things that you are doing in your life that will bring you that joy, that will bring you that happiness, because that's my desire for you. I want to see everyone have joy and I want to see everyone be happy. And you can do that by evaluating what it is that is most important to you in life. So thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. Be blessed. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Storytime with Stephanie. If you're an independent author and you'd like to be a guest on our show, email us at info@stephanieouten.com with your name, the name of your book, and why you believe you should be a part of our show. Also, if you'd like to support our show by sponsoring an ad, you too can email us at info@stephanieouten.com for more information. We'll see you next time.